Merry Christmas! Or happy holidays. I don't know. I suppose whatever you celebrate. What day of Kwanzaa is it? I don't know. I don't know what you're celebrating. Happy Chinooka. Chinooka still going on? Chinooka. I don't know if you saw Smokey Robinson. Someone paid for a cameo for him to say Happy Hanukkah. He said, Happy Chinooka. He goes, I don't know what Chinooka is. But hope you're having a happy Chinooka. These shows are a lot of fun when I can get everybody and we all complain about something and crack wise on one another. This unfortunately happened when my power was out. So I had to do the show in Tijuana. It's surprisingly quieter there. You would think that in the vacation town where I live, you could find some quiet. You just can't. It's still loud where I was, but it's still way quieter than anywhere I could try to do the show here. But we had fun with this. We had fun in the champagne room as well. This one, I believe we went to the champagne room on this one. So definitely check this one out. I was surprised this show was up there, maybe because you guys also enjoy when all of us are together on screen. We genuinely enjoy each other's company. So sadly, we don't get to see each other. This was a rough year. I didn't see anybody from outside of the West Coast, as we usually can see each other through speaking engagements or just trips. So outside of my neighbor Ben. So again, these shows for me mean a lot as well. We get everybody together to hang out. So enjoy this. Sadly, it was a little loud on my end. I tried my best to mute myself as much as I could, and sometimes there's like reggaeton playing in the back for the place I was at. And one of the viewers of the show, Kush Look, always accuses me of being at a Denny's in Mexico. I am not at a Denny's in Mexico when I do this. It is a chain, but it's not a Denny's. Can you figure out where I'm at? All right. Have a good holiday, and I'll be seeing you guys sooner than later. Peace. At hand. Are the kids all right? Anyone who has watched this show knows I love to embrace all my Gen X-ness. I am a 47-year-old man whose fondest memories are watching 22-minute toy commercials called cartoons. Now, I and many people around my age weren't aware we were consuming advertisements as content, but we did, and we ate it up. Adolescent viewers constantly enmeshed in the logic of consumption. Only in retrospect do we recognize that our very formative narratives were structured to sell us dreams as products. Yet this dawning consciousness gave rise to a demand for authenticity, a term that soon itself became a marketable attribute rather than an emancipatory practice. In the case of the band Nirvana, often mythologized as the archetypal anti-corporate grunge band, illustrates this tension. Their mass market success required the branding of authenticity as a palpable commodity, even when that authenticity explicitly critiqued the market. Whether the logo is stamped on a soda can or silk-screened on a flannel shirt, authenticity ultimately serves as packaging for a product, a dynamic reminiscent of Marx's theory of fetishism of commodities. This struggle between meaning and mass appeal permeated in the 1990s cinema, as in Mike Judge's Office Space, where the main character, Peter Gibbons' revolt against the cubicle drudgery epitomizes the search for self-actualization beyond capital's deadening routines. Yet 2 decades later, the hippie capitalists of Silicon Valley have repackaged this very critique. Beanbag chairs, nap pods, and arcade games adorned open plan offices, even as workers logged 50-plus hours a week. And intensification of labor masked as fun. But I say all this to really ask, what happens to the generations that follow the one that happily consumed all those cartoon advertisements, yet was sold on the idea of authenticity? Well, we have the get the bag era, where selling out is the goal, and your self brand can act as the perfect antidote to any sort of moral dissonance. Under neoliberal orthodoxy, every social relation is reconfigured as a transaction, and persons accrue intrinsic value only insofar as they perform in the marketplace. With the hyper commodification of all spaces and the reality that the economy facing young people is one not to be hopeful to enter. While April job numbers show a slight improvement from previous months, much of the job growth was short term, and due to the new administration's lust for wasteful government spending, not in military bloat, but in cutting employment in very valuable government services, the truth behind these employment numbers is quite staggering. In this context, youth may adopt either a dark nihilism or an overzealous hustle culture ethos, seeking side gigs to accumulate enough cultural and economic capital for social and intimate recognition. So I ask, in the end, are they then truly all right? The kids, that is. To help me with this question, are the kids all right? The entire TIR crew is here. Everybody. And we call this the Council of Elders. Let me bring in first my co-host, my homie, my dog, the man of the Mau Mau Hour. And please go back and watch Pascal's most recent Mau Mau episode with Stephen Maher, the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
Also coming in hot, he is the dad of two, Mean Gene Bajlan.
Hello. I was just watching videos of British tourists in Benidorm having a good time. Having a good time.
Speaking of someone that's always having a good time, he's the cheeriest man on the internet. Please welcome Derek Varn.
Hey, smiling makes my face ache.
He's the man that's always hiding somewhere in the world, destroying Ewoks all over the galaxy. He is Deep State Kuba.
Good morning, everyone.
Kuba's been enjoying the new series of Andor because it has a lot more Kuba time in it. Because we all know Kuba is director Krennic. That's who Kuba's real guy is. He's ready to deport the Gormans, right? Launch a propaganda campaign so he can extract the Calkite from the planetary core.
I'm shocked someone says
I would have been flattered if you had just called me Dedra.
I believe I'm actually in the middle of
But I
the
get the
age
full-
back here.
Oh yeah, Dedra is your female avatar as well, I suppose. Her and what's the
Hold on, Gene. We have to bring in the last guy.
Who's the last guy?
Ben Burgess.
Oh yeah. Why is he the last guy?
It's the way the order worked.
I think that's anti-Semitism, but
Wow.
you know.
Well, then that's just what it's going to be today, because off air, you guys-
Reverse alphabetical order.
Off to the races with Gene today, buddy.
and Ben muted himself.
It's progressive stack because, as you know, as a beneficiary of alphabetical privilege my entire life, Jason wants to call me last.
I thought I was going to do the save the best for last thing, but Gene just ruined that whole line. Now I'm going to fuck everybody's day up. Damn, don't piss in your Oreos. Derek Varn, I think this whole idea of doing this started with a conversation we were having in our group chat. Would you like to give your opinion on what's wrong with the kids today?
Where to start? I like to
You
start
got a
off.
timer on you because this is like the Oscars, by the way.
Okay, go. So bunch of things. General illiteracy worldwide has increased, although it's worse in the United States. boys under 24 aren't going to college or trade school. That's actually a bigger deal than going to college. I don't care about making liberal namby-pamby people, but them not going to trade school actually is worrying. 1/8 of men between the ages of 24 and 32 basically don't seem to have friends, don't have a job, don't have a partner. Suicidal ideation has increased amongst all genders in the cohort under 35. In fact, it's increased in the U.S. kind of a little bit astronomically in the past 20 years. So according to the Yale School of Medicine, suicidal attempts amongst the ages of 10 to 24 has increased 62% since 2007. And it at first, when I started pointing this out about a decade ago, actually, I got a bunch of millennial hipster types telling me that I was being alarmist and that it was just going back to his historical norm of the suicide rates of the 70s, which, great time for the youth, the 70s. So there's that. Illiteracy rates in the United States have gone up again dramatically. 40% of people under 35 can't read at even a 5th grade level. 70% if you are impoverished. That's new. Now, that trend has gone up worldwide. The youth all over the world read less well than they used to. Some will say it's a new skill. But the other thing that's happened, and this is not just amongst the youth, this is the entire society, is media literacy rates have dropped profoundly.
But if Viana comes in.
So there is a ton to deal with just with that. Anecdotally, so this is not stats, ideology is almost divided as much among class and region now, but also gender. Gender is a huge division amongst young people and their ideology. It's the most profound in people under 23. Zoomer boys. Actually, the stats on this are wild. They were identifying with Trump about a month ago, but then recent stats have indicated that they've all given up the ghost and just have total despair now. Which, I guess that's what happens when you buy into a pipe dream. And if you goes, oh, this is mostly white people. One of the most interesting statistics for me is in prior generations of people, suicidal ideation was rare amongst the poor and amongst underprivileged groups. Guess what? That's not true anymore. The Black suicide rate for young people has increased 144% in the past 15 years. And that was before the pandemic, actually. We haven't actually done a good adjustment post-pandemic, and all these stats have gone up since then. Latin suicide rates have gone up, and again, prior to the 2010s, this was kind of unheard of. Suicide rates amongst the poor and amongst marginalized groups was really, really low. At least among the youth. And that's not true anymore either. But what's even weirder is comorbidities for suicide in adults are actually less prevalent in people under 21. So for example, young kids, we can't accuse them of drinking too much. They don't seem to have promiscuous sex. That would probably involve actually meeting people. We haven't gotten the Gen Z is killing everything off articles because I guess the baby boomers are dying and actually also think that all people under 50 look alike or whatever, so they can't tell us apart. But we have seen a lot of disengagement from social media. I actually think that'd be a good thing. Disengagement from dating apps and whatnot, probably because they don't have the money for it. They're all super expensive now. And an increased usage of video game time. And I'm not anti-video game. I'm not here to come after the gamers. But it's not a particularly social hobby. So that's just the baseline of why I actually think we had to talk about this. And the other thing, I got tired of elder millennials telling my younger Gen X ass that that the youth were our future and they should give us hope until, you know, the youth didn't vote the way they thought, and now they're freaking out. So I'm also going to chastise that generation too. I also think the generational monikers are a little bit misleading, and so they give the people who are like generational talk is bullshit. It's not entirely, as I've said before, age is a material condition. But for example, if we talk about the politics of Zoomers, you can split them down the middle on who's more likely to be reactionary amongst men. If they're under 23, they're way more likely to express, you know, conservative or super conservative opinions. And if they're over 24, they're way more likely to be woke, progressive, annoying types. And my experience with teaching kids right now backs this up. So it does seem like it's a hyper-reactive generation. Now, I'm not here to. We'll talk about. I'm not. You know, I don't want to start off the show with like, here's my reasons why I think this is happening, and I actually don't think it's like a character flaw in the youth that they chose. So people can lay off of that. I think we actually do have to look at this in a systemic way and say this is not entirely their fault. But the other thing that worries me is we have a generation that feels like they have no future. And they felt like that when the economy was better and there was decent job prospects for them. I say decent because the jobs were shit, and we'll get to that too. But they at least had jobs. This generation has no memory, for the most part, of the Great Recession, or the period of recessions from the 70s through the early aughts. They just don't know it, and their parents, yeah. And their parents don't do that either. So, and lastly, yeah, people are saying it. Executive function has been declining now for 40 years. When I first was learning how to teach, we were told we had research that the average student had a 15-minute executive function, which was down from the executive function pre-television. And I don't know how much to take these studies before the 1960s, but they did exist, of about 30 minutes. Today, the executive function average is about 3 minutes. So that's 3 minutes.
It's like 2 reels.
Yeah, it's 2 reels basically. And what that means is the ability to sustain attention to follow information is gotten very short. I know I sound like Neil Postman talking about this in the 80s when he was complaining about, you know, sound bits and whatnot, but that's universal. And what's interesting about that, before they come at me about the youth, that's happening to everybody. So all generations are showing executive function decline. And it's the worst in the United States because, you know, most things that affect the developed world are worse in the United States. But it's happening all over, too. There's evidence of it happening in Sweden and in Scandinavian countries, which means you can't blame phonics or just the American education system. It is something larger than that. And I'm going to stop off on that time.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that point there, because I really want to highlight this point. As Varn was saying, you know, often this is portrayed in the kind of generational struggle thing. And, you know, we have every generation, you know, talking about the youth of today, et cetera, et cetera. It goes back, you know, right back to the ancient times. But the really critical point that I think Varn is making, at the moment, is that this is a general issue. Oh, hello, little Viana. Okay, I'll get you some. No, but that is happening on all generations at the moment. It's happening, and if you see studies of older generations, you're seeing a decline in attention spans, which is not just about cognitive decline in old age. It's about the sort of technological superstructure that we are operating within in our society, which is undermining people's attention spans. Obviously, this is going to affect the youth the most, as they've been raised in almost entirely inside this kind of TikTok world. But I don't think it can be exclusively put down to a question of the youth. It's happening on a complete societal level, and you see people talk about it anecdotally. People will say things like, I used to read like 3-4 books every few months. Now I don't read a book in the entire year because of all these distractions. I mean, social media is addictive. There's science to show that it's addictive, and everyone to a certain degree has been fundamentally transformed. I mean, you look back to the 90s when people used to, the boomer generation used to worry about their kids believing everything they read on the internet. And now you get to a situation where you have all this boomer AI stuff, which people are pointing at.
And I would just chime in.
The youth
to
are fighting
say-
back.
The youth. Go ahead, Kuba.
I would just chime in to say that along with the turn to neoliberalism and technological changes, there's been a breakdown in the institutions of what Catholics might describe as formation. There used to be a much more conscious attempt by social groups and institutions to have a youth wing. When I remember, whenever you hear about some new up and coming South African political figure that said something that Fox News finds inflammatory, it's always the leader of the youth wing of the ANC. And political parties used to have active youth wings where they would recruit young people. There used to be Boy Scouts. There used to be, Catholic and Christian youth groups. All of those,
by and large, we don't have, because we don't have mass membership organizations of any kind, right? It's not like old people
precisely
are going to do those things, right? I mean,
exactly.
I
think it's a failure of our generation and the generation that formed us in perpetuating and passing along those institutions. I don't know to what extent any of you were sort of formally mentored, but it felt as though that kind of guidance came on an individual basis, where hopefully, in a very meritocratic, neoliberal kind of way, your unique characteristics, your exceptionalness would get the attention of a patron who might be a dissertation advisor, who might be a boss, who might be a publisher of Zero Books or something. And then they would cultivate you. But I don't recall, since leaving the Cub Scouts at age 7, belonging to an organization or a group that would instill some kind of
Can I ask a question?
Self-respect.
Can I ask a question to that, Kuba? And I ask this to everybody. That's interesting. Yesterday, I didn't send it to you guys. I sent this to Bert and my friend Alexander Herbert, and we had a little conversation about it. There was a younger person that did a video kind of being upset with the rallies that Bernie Sanders and AOC were doing. And I found the video interesting because I see these rallies as a great time for organizing. Whether or not you agree with everything Bernie Sanders and AOC are saying, or what they have said over the years, these are rallies of 35,000 people where if you're really trying to put something together, or if you are a part of an organization, what a great time to recruit. Everybody's in one place. And I compared it to the music scene. If you wanted to meet people, if you wanted to get people to know who your band was, you had to get out there in front of people. You couldn't just appear one day and someone care about you. at live shows is where you met other musicians and producers and graphic designers and friends. It feels like because we are so atomized and we can be a legion of one, especially for younger people. I think they're very comfortable with that. And originally when I was writing the introduction, I had a whole thing about that and I kind of touch on that with the Nirvana thing. Nirvana can be the ultimate no sellout group, even though they're on a major label and they did all the major label sellout things. They were
Well, the
marketed
important thing
as,
is what T-shirt you wear when you do your Rolling Stone cover shoot, right? I mean, like that's
yeah.
that tells you how authentic you are.
But is that, and that was kind of the idea in trying to make this somewhat coherent in the introduction was, what happens to a group of people that have accepted certain types of advertising as content, right? And I started off with cartoons. All of us on this screen watched these 22-minute commercials called cartoons, and we didn't know they were 22-minute commercials. There's a younger generation that's very comfortable watching commercials to the point, and someone like Gene Bajlan could speak to this when he gets a chance to get back on. We played with toys growing up, right? There's younger kids that have grown up watching kids play with toys, watching kids play video games. How does that affect what we're talking about right now? Again, especially going back to the AOC Bernie thing, where there's a certain amount of nihilism to anything. Pascal, started off with you. You've been quiet.
I think it's really difficult to really assess how much all of these technological changes combined with the political economy in which we're living in is altering the way we perceive realities. And I think that everyone on the panel so far has made very, very adept attempts to explain how phenomena that are just everyday parts of the quotidian realities of life are destroying the traditional social fabric of what we expected to be social life, family life. There was an article I was reading about the death of marriage, how young men are not getting married anymore. Now, we shouldn't be reactionaries and say, well, all these institutions were great when we had them in the past, but they did create a certain kind of quotidian normalcy that the fracture thereof is causing problems. And I don't think we found a way to replace those things yet. So my question to the group is that how do we create new social infrastructure when the ones that we've seen before have been considered to be too quote unquote regressive for our modern politics?
The thing is, if you offer only regressive institutions, and also most people don't have an experience of them to know why they would be problematic, and the current reality is so much worse. Yeah, they'll imagine it up. I mean, why do you have these individualistic tradcasts among people under 35? These young people, I shouldn't say kids because a lot of them are adults. There's no evidence they've ever been to church. You know, they can like nerd out talking about God and country as if they're as if Catholics, for example, have ever been part of the God and country equation of this country in particular. They can beat off to Opus Dei, you know, but they also don't join it because that would require them to get out of their fucking basements. And the question that I know that sounds really, really judgy, and in some ways it is, but you asked a separate thing. Leftists by and large are still part of the culture that we grow up in. We don't exist outside of it, no matter what we try to tell ourselves about our cool, neat ideology that somehow makes us exempt all the bullshit in our society. We're not. You know, I talk to this about all the time. I hear people on the left talk, you know, young people on the left, middle-aged people on the left talking about unions all the time. When I ask them if they've ever been in one, statistically, it's pretty low. It's actually lower than the general stats, which in general stats are bad enough. Yeah, we talked
I,
about this for a long time.
I will say, as a middle-aged person who talks about unions a lot, I actually was a union official for 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's
You get a pass. I was a union official for 4.
I will say, I've been thinking about what you said earlier about, age as a material condition. I think that's true and it isn't, right? Like, I think that it's saying age is a material condition is like saying that race is a material condition. There's a sense in which it's true, right? That on average, disparities exist, that it tells you something about the on average material conditions that you're, all else being equal, that your age or race would predict that you're exposed to, right? That's very real. But I also think it is important in both cases to keep in mind that these are averages, right? That that it doesn't, that there are going to be lots of people who fit within the group, who haven't been, exposed to the same conditions, at least if by material conditions we're talking about like economics, right? I think there are cultural things that it's much firmer on, right? Like the sort of assault on executive function that you were talking about earlier, right? Has really does afflict both rich and poor, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it also afflicts boomers. I mean, I'm sure everybody can think of a few in their life who have been just like hopelessly online brained over the course of the last several years. But at least if you were, I think a few of us were born in 1980. Jason was born a couple of years before that, right? Like it's, I think if you at least have the benefit of having been born such that you're, been born at a time where the generalized assault on executive function only kicked up to this level when you were an adult, right? I mean, like you do get some benefits from that, right? I mean, just, not because you were more virtuous, but just because like, you had the benefit of maybe learning to read books at an age, at an age when the alternative wasn't presented to you.
Yeah.
I would. I have a few thoughts here.
So now maybe when you're, like now maybe it's like, oh, I only read one book a month, right? Not like as opposed to when the if you already started a much worse point in that cycle when it's like, oh, now I only read one book every 2 years or whatever. But you were saying, Kuba.
Well, one. So Poland announced a program of general universal manhood reserve service. If you're below the age, I think, of 55, you're going to have to join the National Military Reserve for Poland. The idea is to avoid the kind of collapse of military personnel that has bedeviled the Ukrainians over the last year or so. In thinking about Canada and its security situation with respect to its increasingly belligerent superpower neighbor, it might not be inappropriate to at least consider a similar type of institution. And I think that may be a mechanism, perhaps not one that's gender segregated, but along, pardon the expression, an IDF model of universal youth military service. That may be a means of creating institutions where you have some implementation, some examples of a social ethic. It doesn't, of course, need to be paired with toxic nationalism. But I don't think that short of some kind of universalist program, you're going to get around this problem. The labor market is too fragmented. Even if you had large-scale unionization, you're not going to be able to scale that up into large universalist organizations, and it's probably going to catch people at a later stage of their lives. And this would be an opportunity as well to distribute more broadly in the population certain habits that and skills that might be necessary if political contestation between different ideological elements becomes more heated. Right now, one of the greatest disadvantages of the left in the United States is that even as the potential for a transition to a more coercive style of politics is likeliest, the skill set to operate under those conditions is almost entirely absent from the left. It's a monopoly of reactionary and right-wing forces. Even liberals aren't very good at it. So that's one way that we could potentially get out of at least some of this problem. It might also be a vehicle to deliver a universal basic income, which would just be attached to your participation in that kind of universal service program. So, if these were Ewoks, I would just make them do it. But you have to incentivize the humans.
I mean, the problem is, I think, what people are driving at here is the way that the internet has been a double-edged sword with so much of civil society, whereas historically, you had to go into these physical spaces, which required a minimum amount of effort. Nearly everything has been kind of simplified through the online circumstances. That means that, people acted, let's say on the political front, people act as if listening to and consuming the correct podcasts is political action, as opposed to actually getting out there and doing civil society, or that arguing with people on Twitter and on Facebook, however enjoyable for the dopamine hits it is a form of politics, when really it's kind of a simulacrum of politics. The verse, it's as if somebody goes and watches a bunch of pornography and then says, I'm a playboy, I'm successful with women because I consume a certain amount of things. So much politics has shifted from the politics. I mean, just to give you an example, when the Ukraine war broke out, people were like decrying the consumption of Russian cultural products because people have come almost entirely to identify with their politics, with their consumption habits. Today, when you look at protests, even around the world, for example, recently in Turkey, the operating, when politics does come offline into the real world, it's not in the form of a general strike, it's in the form of boycott programs, because the only way that you can express yourself is through what you consume. And I think the internet has been a key accelerant of that, which has, while it's created an illusion that it's now simpler to build connections and create civil society organizations, it's the reverse is happening. The internet is becoming a substitute for this. I'll give you a concrete example. In the past, when you were a student, up until probably the mid 2000s, maybe the early 2010s, you used to have to physically go and register for your classes. That is, get a paper form, look through things, take it to the office, get it stamped, blah, blah, blah. Now, that physical action required you to use a certain amount of mental capacity. Now, to understand your program, what courses you need, and seek advice where you needed to it. Now, students can, technically, everything should be a lot easier because all the information about your student program is online, and all you have to do is go online and register for your class. However, that ends up making it more confusing for the students because they become completely helpless and don't know how to do basic things because they never had to go through that process. So, for example, with the with the left, with the millennial left, let's say the Bernie Corbyn wave, I think a lot of the political energy of that movement rightly or wrongly, and we participate this in as well, got the emotional energy got deflected into got deflected into the consumption of online media. What is the political product of everything? Of the 2016 to 2015 to 2020 period, a proliferation of left-wing media on the internet, but that hasn't been married necessarily to that hasn't been necessarily connected to the rise of kind of new civil society organizations. If anything, if we look at the kind of Bernie AOC tour, which seems to be attracting a following, that is not the product of kind of online organizing. It's the product of people reacting to a very concrete set of circumstances that have been brought about by the mismanagement of the economy in the Trump era. So, I think, at the core of the problem that we're looking at today with the quote unquote youth, which I don't think is a youth problem necessarily. I think Ben laid it out quite well. It's like we have a memory of a world where, if you wanted to meet someone in town, you had to arrange on the telephone beforehand to meet at a specific place outside the McDonald's at this time. And
if they didn't show up, you just waited around and
just waited around like a lemon.
Maybe eventually you'd go find a payphone to see if they were still home.
Or you used your skills of deduction and went to the different spots where you knew the friend would be, because that's how you had to find your friend.
There are entire classic movies where that's the whole plot.
Right, exactly.
There's no Goonies for this generation, right? That's why there's I've seen multiple movies where it's kids on screens like this being murdered by someone and running from the killer, but they're all on screens like this. Just leave the fucking house. Leave the house, man. Movie over.
So yeah, I think so much, and I don't think it's just politics. I think so much emotional energy in terms of friendships and things like that gets deflected into these applications. So you end up with
none of it's their fault, but it all sucks. This is not.
It's not quote unquote.
Be really clear. This is not yelling at the kids. I'm just yelling at clouds, but I've got a lot of shit to say to the clouds.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think it's just kids, right? I mean, it's if you get divorced in your 40s and you go back on the dating scene, you don't go hang out in bars. You get on the old people dating app, right? And you end up on old people dick dash, and it's not particularly fun. Everything is being kind of mechanized and monetized.
I need you to stop talking about me on air like that. I'm gonna first of all need you to stop with the disrespect, okay, Jean Bajlan?
You said it, not me, brother.
Okay, but you didn't have to put my laundry. You don't take someone's underwear and put it on the front of the house.
I was thinking of Doug Lane, but if you want to put yourself on
old people dick dash, I'm going to go back and
that's the second Doug Lane reference.
Doug Lane is on old people dick dash. He's on old people dick dash. Jason still, can go with the normals. But anyway, the point is, I think so much of our energy in our daily lives gets expended on sitting behind a screen. Obviously, that's in the work context where we have all this stuff that is automated online, endless emailing and things like that. But increasingly, even you mentioned video games. I have a friend who works for Rockstar Games. It's it's the company that it's a huge company. It makes Grand Theft Auto, et cetera, and they make the point that
I have a friend who wrote a section of the Bible. It's a book. Maybe you've heard of it.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Not everybody knows GTA. Anyway, my point comes down to this: is that even within the video games industry, they're noticing that people's ability to play video games is deteriorating because no. Because people are deteriorating because they're getting used. They're competing with TikToks, right? So kids are watching TikToks rather than playing games. And if you go back to the 90s, gaming was, people were complaining about gaming, but compared to today, it was a very social thing to do. You'd have your friends come around, you'd have the two controllers out and play Street Fighter for hours and things like that. Now people are, you'd have at least personal contact with people. So I think I think I think there is some real issues with the way that technology is being rammed down our throats, and it's not necessarily that the technology per se is bad, but because it's because of the financial incentives within our current economic system means that things to generate a short profit are going to be the best. So rather than people going into like, I don't know, a computer industry to develop like apps to help people that would genuinely make your life better, it's like the latest sex app because that's what sells.
So to take the focus a little bit off of the computers, because we always blame that, and I think that's fair and to some degree right. But I want to point out the other reasons why we don't have these structures that Kuba was talking about. One, even if you're in a union, the only places that are really structured the way old factories were, and this includes actually today's factories, are big civic institutions of the public sector, because they have large people in physical buildings that have to meet every day and deal with large amounts of people. That is one of the reasons why public sector unions have grown to the expense of everything else. If we talk about deindustrialization, what kind of deindustrialization are we talking about? We aren't talking about the fact that U.S. Doesn't produce anymore. By that, what they actually mean is it doesn't have an internalized supply chain. But the U.S. is, even before Trump's big move, was the second biggest producer of finished commodities in the planet, the first being China. The difference, and this is true in China now too, people don't work in those factories. You do not have a 1950 style factory floor. Let's go to the next thing. Real estate is insane. So if you're an organization, you want to meet in a physical place, where are you going to meet at? The cost of even a religious organization getting a building is nuts now. Conversely, there are buildings full of gray hairs that have their buildings by legacy, even though they're dying. So you see all these churches with massive buildings that they built in the 90s and maybe early aughts that are only full of 50-year-olds, don't know how to attract young people. And yet, since they own that property outright, they're hanging on to it like dear God. This is also true of unions, by the way. It's part of why unions aren't as concerned as they should be about recruitment. But let's talk about the new union growth. I've talked about this before. Most of the new union growth in the aught 10s was in the small service sector. Good. I want to support it. It's great. But you know what it isn't? These are not mass unions entering workforce of like hundreds of people who can do social functions together and all that. Most of the 400 union applications during the Biden administration that both liberals and leftists were making a big deal out of were Starbucks, usually about 15 to 40 people per union, the way it was structured. So there are physical, real world impediments to this.
Sorry, Derek, can I stop you there? Because I want to ask you a question about that, because about what the takeaway is from that, right? Because surely, if we're going to have a revitalized labor movement in the 2020s, and I certainly don't pretend to know what that looks like. I really don't. But surely the code that you have to crack is precisely how to organize small workplaces, because I mean that is harder for obvious reasons, but I mean that's got to be the challenge, because it's not just Starbucks. I mean, for kind of some of the reasons you were gesturing at earlier, like factories that still exist are a lot smaller too now, right? Like everything's smaller workplaces. So I mean, it's this, on the face of it, I mean, like you could even take what you just said as grounds for optimism. It's like, hey, look, some people succeeding, at least, maybe not in the most strategically vital sectors, but some people succeeding in this really hard thing we need to figure out how to do now.
The question is, are they getting good contracts when they actually form unions and they're not? Yeah. But I think the bigger thing, you have a valid point, and I actually do have an answer to it. But the problem that you have to do is you have to break 100 years of left-wing habit. And that is, you have to really put the emphasis on social unionizing and reaching out to the community at large, and not just the shop floor, with the shop floor being the focus. but with the general support of pulling in the community, the tennis areas, this sort of thing. Otherwise, you don't have big enough bodies to really socialize people. And you go, oh, socialization, that's a big deal. Well, that is a big deal part of it. Another thing I would say, Kuba was talking about how the right.
I mean, look, if you go with my favorite widely accused, mechanistic economistic class reductionist Vivek Chibber, I mean, his support of the class matrix is ultimately, even if a lot of people missed it, about that like working class organizing is a cultural achievement, right? That it never comes automatically, right? So I mean, it's not, I mean, it's kind of the socializing in a certain sense is the whole game,
right? So it's funny. Someone was just like, you guys make it too complicated. It's, I watched TikTok and now I have brain damage, and I'm like, well, wouldn't that imply that you can't judge what's too complicated or not? But anyway, back to the other point that Kuba made about like use of force and violence and military skills. I do think they are more likely to be found on the right, but I actually got to say, there's not a lot of evidence. There's a ton of it on the right now either. I mean, I've seen the most likely conscripted ICE recruits because they're not very well trained, and it's very clear, and they have like man buns and they don't look like federal agents. And they look like soy boys. And the reason why that
I also think we need to make a separation here between like gun ownership and anything that you can remotely describe as like military skills, never mind the courage to actually pull the trigger, right? Like this is because I think that one thing that one thing that America like really leads the world in is totally unserious people who collect guns as a hobby, as like it's like LARPing but with like actual ammunition, and we have so much of that, right? And I think the overwhelming majority of people who do that, and I'm not saying there's nothing dangerous about it. There's a lot dangerous about it, although mostly to like children, who accidentally shoot themselves and stuff like that. But
mostly suicide, if we're honest. That's
well, that even more so, right? But yeah, because it makes it too easy in the moment. But it's just, but it's like it's not. But I do think that most of those people, one are no more eager to throw away their lives than most. I mean, especially because this is actually a population that tilts relatively economically comfortable as these things go, right? Are no more eager to throw away their lives than anybody else is, and two, like don't actually know very much about it. I mean, it's just in a lot of cases it is weird, dangerous aesthetics.
Yeah, well, I wanted to actually bring that up because one of the things we have to deal with is the changes in the military. So even people with military experience have experience with drones. Not all. I mean, there are people who've seen active boots in the ground combat, but there's not that many anymore. The average Iraq war veteran is older than me.
At the same time, there is a great deal of relevance in understanding how drones work, especially if you think about the Ukrainian drone war versus the global war on terror drone war. We're not talking about ultra expensive Reapers that you're piloting from half, an entire hemisphere away, but units that you yourself assemble, operate, manage, run, and that are available commercially for, maybe a few $1,000s, enough that scrape together a GoFundMe and blow yourself up a Russian tank.
Yeah, I had a conversation with my brother who's about he's in his 30s, but a lot of my students talk this way too, and he was like, well, if you came in my house, I have like 5 guns and I'd fight you off. And I said this to my own brother, but I was like, dude, I lived through a counter revolution. If I was going to your house to wipe out your family, I'd just turn on the gas and light a match. Like your gun wouldn't do much. And so like the reason why I bring that up, it was just to remind my brother that your vision of this as like hand-to-hand gun combat is just wrong if you ever were in that situation. I went one of the weirdest experiences of my youth, and I had a bunch of them, but is we had a Croatian exchange student at my school when I was 17, and he would tell me stories about making let's say airborne IUDs that were basically fertilizer bombs in dryers dropped out of an airplane, dropped out of the equivalent of a Cessna, because he had gone through the Yugoslav wars. And I just think, one of the problems with Americans is we're constantly exposed to violence, but we're not exposed to violence at all unless you're in very specific areas like Skid Row or something like that. And even that's not organized violence. So it's an interesting thing to hear people talk about. I do agree with Kuba that more. I've actually talked about like, hey, you know how I know how to use a bolt action? I got trained because I used to be a corrections officer, which is the worst job of my life, and I would never tell anyone to do it. But it does mean that I have a skill that a lot of people don't have. And so it's. I do think we have to take that seriously, but I also think the gun LARPing is actually very dangerous, and we've seen examples of it going really south with leftists who aren't trained versus people who have been trained with guns for a long time. I don't bring up the specific instance, but I think we all know what I'm referring to. And it went poorly, and I would say when I mention stuff to even my audience, like, people are like, oh, abolish the police. I'm like, yeah, you could do that if you have universal conscription into local security services and it has a time limit and all that. And they're like, what? That's not abolishing. I'm like, yeah, it is. If you want to abolish the police, you want to get rid of basically what is the equivalent of a standing army. You have to replace it for a long while, probably, with what is effectively a conscript militia. And
I would argue for forever. I mean, like, I think we can, I mean, look, I think that if you created a society without poverty and etc., I think
you'd still have diddlers. You'd still have diddlers.
Exactly. Chase in just the most economical ways ever. But yes, I mean, right, exactly, right. It's like that. There are reasons human beings commit crimes against each other that aren't about economics, right? That's
agreed.
I think a truth that we have to acknowledge, right? So it's like I think that, and it's also really weird, by the way. I know this is off topic, but it's just it's just really weird that, like, the way people use the word abolish here, right? Because it's like, if you think about like the 19th century, like, people, like, nobody would call like Abraham Lincoln an abolitionist, because even though he was anti-slavery, he was anti-slavery in like a long-term gradualist way, right? Being an abolitionist means you want to get rid of it in the next 10 seconds, right? I mean, that's what abolition means, right? That they have a no ifs, ands, or buts about this. We need to get rid of this right away. And none of the people who call themselves abolitionists about police and prisons in the U.S., if you actually like interrogate them about their views, are abolitionists in those sense.
And a lot of things come around to like when people talk about the Marx Engels and the abolition of the family, right? They totally don't look at those kind of things within their historical context. Firstly, you have the question of translating the word, abolition. What does it mean? What does Aufhängung mean? That's a German word which doesn't quite, which the word abolition doesn't take places. But when Marx was talking about the abolition of family, he was talking about the abolition of a particular form of family, like stuff where you could have no-fault divorces. That's the things they were pushing for at the time, that women would have the right to initiate divorce, that they would have equal rights within a marriage. When he talked about abolishing the family, it was not abolishing, but people sort of have a presentism when they look at historical sources and don't understand the context within which they were written. And also when we come to the, police abolition, defund the police, those kind of things. I mean, the defund slogan I always found a bit weird because it was a right-wing framing of things, right? Why focus on defunding the police instead of focusing on funding the social democratic services that would drain the swamp, as it were, of the criminality. Obviously there are issues with policing, but if you go to a lot of places where they do have those issues with policing, it's not that they don't want policing; they want better and more competent policing, combined with economic measures that will create circumstances where people don't resort to crime. Yes, there's always a kind of, I think recidivism is like just a part of the human condition, but it's like very clear that economics is related to that, because if you live in a nice neighborhood, there's virtually no policing, right?
Yeah,
There's no necessity for policing.
Right. I mean, I live right by a police station, and that probably tells you a lot about my neighborhood. But the
Varn in the hood.
I'm more in the barrio. But the point that I was gonna, actually, it's a very safe neighborhood. That's the funny thing. It's the police aren't here because of the crime rate. The point that I want to like drill down in on here though a little bit, because we're hitting it, but the left has not. I don't. In fact, I wish we stopped talking about the left so much, but this is a trait that I think I have seen in the popular.
We have leftists. There is no left in America.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I don't know that there's a left anywhere, but maybe China. I'll give China a left, but no one else gets one. Vietnam, I'll give them a left too. But this whole left I hear in Europe, I'm always amused by, because I'm like, well, you guys have a much better functional social safety net than we do, but you're basically run by neoliberals.
They're run by neoliberals. I mean, I don't know how much is worth getting down this rabbit hole, but it does seem like France, for example, has like, I don't know what the bar is for what we're calling a left, but it's like they have it's very, very far from holding state power, but I mean, like, it exists to a much greater degree, at least, than the American one does.
France Unbowed has 600,000 people, whereas the DSA has 70. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Yeah. But I guess my point though is that one of the big things I've seen on the liberal left, and even on the far left to some degree, is complaining about capitalism all the time, but also making the social damages of capitalism, from obesity to the impossibility to have a marriage, into a virtue for a long time until people admit that maybe it isn't. That is a trend I've seen amongst leftists who critique capitalism, but when I've pointed out things that capitalism does, they don't want us to do anything about it. All right. Now I say this, you're like, oh, which leftist? Well, when I used to talk about the social determinants of health and why we shouldn't blame individuals for their health situations, I wasn't saying, that we should, for example, just say all this is good and there's nothing you can do about it by lifestyle, just because, like Maha idiots are doing that sort of thing.
This is good. Maybe I wonder if this does connect back to like where Jason started in his opening monologue. Because I do think that it. So if you think about that sort of like what he said at the beginning, which I think is kind of derived from what you said, Derek, in the conversation that kind of led to this episode, that about people sort of ending up either being nihilists or like thinking they can grind set their way to wealth, and those being the options, right? I think it's like really unhelpful for that I do think a lot of, I'll take Pascal's point, leftists, right, have, at least ones that I see online, tend to sort of take this good instinct towards, okay, I don't want to make everything about individual virtue. I want to, I want to make things structural, right? Which is like a good instinct as far as it goes, right? But like, I think sort of take it to like sounding like they're telling people that there's nothing they can do to improve their lives, which is just like, okay, so we're on team nihilism, which, if that's what, if that's what one person, one team is offering you, and the other team is offering you, grind set bullshit that, you need to invest in crypto and,
I was going.
all of that stuff. That second one's going to sound better to a lot of people, right? Like I think there is something to like. Look, I mean, just because you have a left-wing structural analysis of where this stuff comes from, doesn't mean that you can't give people reasonable advice about how to do better with the hand that they're dealt.
Well, I think there's also one really interesting issue is the kind of discourse around fat shaming and body positivity and things like that, right? And oh, look at Varn. He just sneaks off as soon as I talk about body positivity. Classic Varn. I think that's, on one hand, people obviously shouldn't be bullied if they're overweight, right? But also, I think, some radical liberal tendencies to kind of, say like, we should embrace all these body shapes. Like, we want people to be healthy. We're not talking here about like you're a bit overweight. You're like like someone who does physical work, like, and has a beer belly and works outside or something like that. We're talking about people who are like in their 20s going around Walmart on a mobility scooter. I don't think it's particularly helpful to be saying people like, that's an okay way of being. That's not to say that they should be bullied, but we should say like, that's not healthy. You shouldn't do that. Yes, society is creating conditions with this cheap food. We need to have these. Macro policies to get rid of ultra processed food, to increase the quality of our food. Perhaps subsidizing vegetables, getting rid of food deserts. All those kind of macro things need to be done. But there's also an element of individual responsibility there that I feel like Ben hits on it. It's like, if you go too far into there's this kind of notion that self-help is inherently a right-wing thing. But I think people should say, like, you can't change these big circumstances, and we get it. There's all these things in your society around you that you are pushing towards this position. But you do have some agency, right? You do have some agency in there, and take what agency you have to improve your living conditions. I think one of the reasons that Jordan Peterson got so popular was because he was just giving very banal, sensible kind of advice, like, wash your ass, clean your room, groom yourself. Those are all things that anyone who has dealt with mental health things will say.
Clean your room is actually great advice. For like improving people's like emotional well-being.
And the same thing is it's like people shouldn't be bullied if they're overweight, but at the same time, you don't have to enter the classic one was Lizzo. Lizzo did all this stuff about being body positive. Then they mocked her on South Park about being so fat. And then she started losing weight and then started burning all pictures of herself, which just shows that the entire body positivity thing she was putting forward was just a facade to people don't want to be unhealthy. And it's not even
I think it's part of marketing, though, Gene. I was there when she launched at one of the early festivals she played at when they were trying to launch her.
How many rockets did they have to launch her with? How much fuel did that get?
Wow. She was actually a little smaller, but she's always been a bigger woman. And I think that was part of the appeal of what the selling point was going to be for her. Whether or not you want to look at that as like, we have this singing mammy for you. I don't think a lot of people understand what that looks like or what that is, because so many words have been redefined over the years. And, coon is one of them. We talk about that on this show, that the meaning of that word, even minstrel, is just gone. Pascal, do you want to add something to this conversation? You've been really quiet.
No, man. I think that the direction this conversation is getting helpful in terms of the left's ability to diagnose solutions for individuals without just laying it all on structuralism is something that I think is a refreshing realization of something that I haven't seen. Frankly, we can also often get into the kind of like, oh, we can't blame individuals for their problems. And I'm not saying that we should, but at the same time, we should be able to get into type of solutions for problems that may have some remedies as well. And I think that's part of the problem, is that the left doesn't seem to have answers for anything, while the right seems to have answers for everything.
Yeah, even though they make them up.
And I mean,
Yeah,
I would.
they're so fucking confident about them. I would also just say, just to like connect the dots here, like obviously this is not anything like a panacea, but like, you know, if you're thinking about those sort of challenges of real world organizing, right, that we were talking about earlier, you know, what, you know, even trying to figure out what like a revitalized workers movement would look like in the, you know, under the economic conditions, the 2020s, et cetera, like, you know, there are a lot of other much more basic things you need to figure out to do that. But like, look, if the people who are out there you know, trying to build this stuff, A, seem to have their lives reasonably together, and B, are the kind of people that would give people reasonable, helpful advice about their own lives, you know, those are people more people want to spend time around.
Which brings me to my point, and I was hoping somebody else would make it. Hassan Piker, right? In a lot of ways, he is an excellent example of a role model for especially younger men. He has the right takes on everything in politics that most of us can mostly agree with, which is the most you can say. And he manages that kind of avuncular, not entirely paternalistic, but older brother relationship with his chat, where he doesn't let them off the hook, but he also seems like he gives a shit. Maybe it's the Ottomanism in his background. So I'll pivot to Gene.
Why are you pivoting to me?
All right, I'll pick up on this. There's a lot of interesting stuff to pair apart here. One of the things that I find very interesting is people who come in and they was like, "Oh, you guys think you're the only true left?" No, we don't actually. I don't. I include myself. I live in the same society as you guys do. I might be more aware of certain things, but I have the same problems. And that's the first step I think that we as left figures need to take. But the problem is that even if you take that, we are trained in a culture to respond to criticism as a critique of self because we associate ourselves with our consumption habits and with other people's perspective of us. And that's good, but there is no longer reciprocal relationships that really do that. And I want to actually say something here. Reciprocal relationships are mildly oppressive. Grow up. They are. Like, I don't like it when Jason pulls me aside and says, Varn, you're being an emotional dickbag. He doesn't do that much, actually. But if he was, yeah, it would hurt. But do I need it? Like, I have pulled, I talked about this on the daily show. I pulled comrades to the side and say, hey, treat your girlfriend better. Did they like to hear that? No, but would they like to keep a girlfriend? I've had all kinds of people come to me for mentorship because it's lacking in their life. And I'm a teacher and I talk like a teacher, even though I talk like a blowhard asshole one. And I do think we on the left, and whatever the fuck that means, I'm not sure that there's a coherent left right now to valorize. But I would say, we need to have an established minimum for outreach, right? And I would agree, like even my zealot self does not hate Hassan Piker, and I didn't hate Michael Brooks either. Like, Michael and I were friends. Because we also talked about positive life models and how to get people to like try to do these things. It's just very hard to do alone. In fact, I'm going to say it's impossible to do alone. One of the things about personal responsibility is picking the right groups to belong to. And I'm going to step out with that.
Can I ask this question to you guys? Because in the whole, someone brought up, well, is trying to talk to Hassan Piker a good idea in quote unquote meeting people where they are, which is also one of those things that people say a lot, but it's a little more complicated than that, depending on the environment that you work in. I think the problem with trying to talk to Hassan is it becomes a business opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And we do our own thing here. And I'm not trying to kind of play that game where if I say your name enough, maybe it rings out into your world and then you bring me on, and I can try to get some of the viewership that you have to grow whatever it is I'm doing.
And chat, this is 100% true. We've been trying to get Jason to yell the N-word at FD Signifier for at least 6 months to grow.
Oh, I've said on air I don't like that guy, but he's not going to do anything about it because then he'd have to talk to me. And why would he risk doing that? I mean, you have to realize who you are in the grand scheme of things. I'm very small, and that dude just hit like 1 million whatevers. So why the fuck would he want to talk to somebody that's going to question his entire being, right? So I get why some shows don't. I mean, Hassan has played a clip from this show, so and I've met him, so it's not like he doesn't understand I exist. And it's also just not something I'm trying to do. I don't think that's the solution to anything more than if that at that point that's about market share. That's not about really going out in communities and quote unquote meeting people.
Jason, I really respect your commitment to authenticity. Hassan Piker, please, I will do whatever it takes. Have me on your show. Please. I will betray everyone on screen here. I will put them through the Ewok special. For the love of God, comrade, brother, Hasanabi. I
have to. If Kuba ever gets on, if he ever goes on Hassan Piker's stream, he has to go. We have to crowdfund him a awesome Krennic outfit with the cape. So he has to be dressed up in the white Star Wars intelligence. With the cape.
You can buy that right now.
I don't know, man. I think that's a mistake. I think that I think if Kuba goes on Hassan, he should do it as his truest self, which is tracksuit Kuba.
I would kind of dig if Kuba did it in the Star Wars suit.
I would like tracksuit Vader. That's how we that's how we combine this. We make tracksuit Vader. I guess one of the things I want to bring up real fast, though, because all this hits on this, is parasocial relationships substituting for real ones, and I want to also say, just because the relationship is through a screen doesn't mean it isn't a real relationship. And I know this is going to sound, but Ben and I knew each other through a screen for like a decade. You know, what makes something social and not parasocial is it reciprocal? Do you know almost as much about the other side as they do about you? And I have seen the commodification of parasocial relationships. I mean, fuck, we all take advantage. We all kind of live in that world. I make money from it. I'm not gonna pretend I don't. But I want to be very clear about that. When people are like, oh, should I go talk to Hassan Piker? No, you should aspire to act like Hassan Piker in your real life. Doesn't matter if you talk to him. I mean, it might if you need a business venture or something, like Jason said, but that's not the point. But I do worry about the commodification of these parasocial relationships down to sex. People mention sex work. I am not actually here to talk. You know, I have a very, 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 very complicated view on sex work, but I want to notice something that kind of that I started really seeing amongst young people, which that OnlyFans moved from being about small amateur porn to being about paying for someone to also chat with you and act like a girlfriend. And not even the way an escort acts like a girlfriend, but as in like I am virtually simulating a text kind of sorta in this. And what came out recently is like they even hire agencies where people pretend to be the figure that you're chatting with now. So it's not even authentic, whatever that means.
It's crazy out there. Like I was watching, I think she's called Froggy something. She's a YouTuber. She's quite funny. The Huck Tour girl created a dating coaching app, which was basically all just Huck Tour girl AIs that people talk to get advice for dating. It's insane out there.
I saw that. Did I send that to you?
No, I mean I saw it on. I think it's Froggy something.
I saw that.
Do you know who I mean?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
She's very, very talented video essayist. And it was like the Hawk Tour stuff was just like, what is going on? But it's not surprising. I mean, like, this is something that Meta is like trying to force on people, like
The
to have your
AI bot chat.
AI
yeah.
bots. It's like it's really depressing.
There was a joke about that in what I can't remember what show I was watching. Maybe it was even like a Saturday Night Live, where this dude, like everybody was like, okay, let's do your phones. And on his phone, he was like a group of couples. On his phone, he had this woman that was older, and she would just send him positive messages. And his wife was upset about it. And he's like, you're cheating on me with this woman. He's like, you don't understand. She tells me I can do it. And I don't suck. And then it ends with the image of with the woman. And again, she's supposed to be a lot older, you know, taking off her shirt and showing her boobs. I can't remember what I saw that on, but I thought it was funny because I do think a lot of the connection people are looking for isn't so much let me see those big pepperoni nipples. Sometimes it's just, can you tell me something positive? Ask me how I'm doing. I mean, I don't think we understand how much how are you doing and good afternoon. Ben and I were on a 5-mile walk yesterday. Unbeknownst to him, it was going to be 5 miles. That is a very me thing to do to people.
I had an idea.
Yeah,
You know.
did you?
I mean, I knew it was going to be I wanted it to be a substantial walk. I mean, I you know, I'm not.
Yeah, Ben's like, I'm trying to get these 10,000 steps in. I was like, got to walk for you. So anyway, we're making this walk, and throughout the walk, one of the things that's very common where we live, and maybe it is in your neighborhood, is a greeting. You know, good afternoon, good evening, how are you? Is extremely common, even when you're exchanging money to buy things. And we were kind of talking about that, and there's been instances where there's been mass shooters in workplaces that didn't shoot people because someone was like, hey, you're back from vacation, or how did that surgery go? There was one mass shooting, I think it was in Hawaii, where the guy took out all those people at a Xerox, and one person remembered that he was on leave from an injury. He was like, oh, hey, you're back from that thing, and he didn't shoot that person. Like, go ahead,
So
Pascal.
the moral of the story is that to avoid getting shot in a mass shooting, engage in greetings.
I mean, how often do you guys say hello and good afternoon to people?
Every day, because I teach kids.
Wow.
Oh,
Look at Mr. A. Why don't you just be the Pope then, God damn it.
There's a bunch of reasons why you don't want. If I was the Pope, you could guarantee we're bringing the Crusades back. But except I don't know who it would be against. It would be the Protestants. We need to finish the Protestant question. That's also my big theory for how to screw up American right wing religious groups, which is not as big as it used to be, but just to remind the Protestants that they're supposed to hate Catholics. But anyway, no, I mean, I do say hey to people all the time. I wish some of it, I think it's because I was enculturated Southern, which is not always great because it also makes me hot-headed and crazy. And really honor driven in a way, you know, as Ben also probably says hi to people, but he's less passionate about it because he's acculturated with Western, and, you know, you guys are always nice. But I do think, to bring it back, I do think it's important that we actually show some kind of civility. But I also think I also sometimes it gets interpreted to like be a pushover and never ever be like that person's out. No, occasionally you do have to be like, this person's behavior is damaging. But I think the problem we have today with that, with a bunch of people, is it's really easy to get rid of people in your life because you don't have a lot of in-person physical connections with them. So people are too quick to do it in some ways, and then they react to that, and then they tolerate people that they shouldn't, because they're also not used to dealing with the physical consequences of people being jackasses. And so they accept people they shouldn't for too long too. And I think we see this across the board. I think it's like, you know, and again, when we're talking about young people, we're really talking about people who have the same social problems as everyone else, but there's no other real mental model other than maybe TV or whatever that, and who knows if they even watch TV, that they have other than this. That's the only real difference in my mind, except for baby boomers and everything, and you know they're actually a generation. But everybody else is kind of our differences are about exposure, you know, the possible accumulation of non-liquid wealth, which in the United States, for reasons of regulation, is particularly age-based, and that's not unique to us, but it's actually pretty. There's some things we did to be progressive that have had some knock-on effects that aren't great. So, for example, in Canada or Europe, when they raise interest rates, it is eventually felt by all homeowners. In the United States, it's based on when you enter the market, whether or not you feel that stuff. And
it's whether or not you're able to enter the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this point, yeah, very much, it is whether or not you're able to enter the market. And for a long time, home ownership was easier in the U.S. than it was in Canada or Europe. I think now it's just hard everywhere, and it's just as hard here as it is in Canada. But there's more wealth accumulated from that because of things like interest rate policies and how they're locked for some people and not for others. And, you know, there are certain risky behaviors that get incentivized when there doesn't seem like there's any way to like play the game and win. There's plenty of studies that people waste money on stupid bullshit, basically, when the idea of saving just doesn't really make sense because the costs are so high and the luxuries are actually way cheaper than they used to be. Now that's not going to be true in America soon, probably. Or it's already beginning to change, but I do think we've seen a lot of that, and I don't know. I don't have an easy answer for that, but I do think that we who are talking about radically changing society should tell people something like, you know, yeah, not everything that happens to you is your fault, and we don't live in a just world, and you should give all that stuff up. But you're not a victim. This victim crap isn't good for us to promote all the time. I don't even think people like it. And you can actually actively change your life, and not just by changing politics. If you wait for politics to change for you to actively change your life, you're not going to be a good political subject either. You're not going to have the skills you need to survive in that scenario, whether it's more combative or more diplomatic. It doesn't matter. You don't have those skills.
And one thing that I'd add to that we haven't touched on, which I think is we need to in an episode about what's up with youth, the experience of going to university has become much as it's more and more of a requirement for many different kinds of career tracks. It's no longer just this elite segment of society that gets exposed to that. And universities are the cost of a college education creates this durable, undischargeable debt burden that is just going to sit with you for the rest of your life. The only way out of that is to perhaps work for the military industrial complex for a period of time until you can retire some of those debts. But also, college for our generation was supposed to be a time of parties and hijinks. Now it's a stress factory. Apart from the protest culture, which I don't mean to criticize, but it does create a tremendous burden on young people who are just making their way independently. There's the intensely competitive pressure of doing well enough to set yourself up for the next stage of life. And at this point, they are some of the first Americans to experience the Trumpian purges. In the case of international students, it's personally. But in the case of American students, right, those are people they know who are being targeted and singled out for political speech and disappeared as a result of it.
I mean, people ask me why, when you go to these protests and rallies that you see right now, why there's so many gray hairs, and I was like, 2 reasons: the Palestine protest didn't seem to work, and people they're being booted out of universities for them. I mean, what happened this week at UCLA wasn't even a Trump thing. You had the university administration call in riot police for screening a fucking movie, and that doesn't get into the gender disparity in education and all that kind of stuff. And this isn't even touching that. It's just, why would you protests don't achieve much, and now they have a really high cost. Before, if we're honest, protests didn't achieve much, but they didn't really have a really high cost.
Well, the other,
right?
I think the comparison between BLM and the Israel-Palestine protest are quite telling, because I think what Black Lives Matter, whatever the organic origins of that protest movement were, especially in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, those protests directly benefited the Democratic Party. They were co-opted by a bunch of grifters who got paydays out of it, and they also provided a mechanism to vent public anger, partly over the racial thing. I also think people were going stir crazy because of the lockdowns. And so these were kind of tolerated by the Democratic Party as a vehicle to get into power. The Israel-Palestine protest had no natural patron within the American political establishment. They weren't beneficial to the Democratic Party, and they weren't beneficial. They were beneficial in some way, but very indirectly to the Republican Party. But the Republican Party also had a vested interest in kind of being against these kids. From the perspective of the kids protesting in it, though, it must have been profoundly disorientating, because in 2020 you're protesting in favor of legal equality and social justice, and you're getting a pat on the head from the mainstream media for it. And then 3 years later, you're protesting on the same grounds, like on the idea of, I think most of these protesters, they're not hardcore Hamasniks. I know the Israel-Palestine movement quite well. Yes, there are the old Islamist weirdos who always hang around, but the mainstream of the movement is a kind of models itself on the anti-apartheid movement. And they did it. They've been told that this is what they're supposed to be doing, fighting for justice. And then instead of getting the pat on the back, they get called anti-Semites and get the bully truncheon and kicked out of university over it. Profoundly disorientating process for that generation that came into political existence then. Because at the end of the day, one set of protests were patronized by an element of this political establishment, and one were. And now those kids must be completely disorientated about what's going on.
Gene with the spot on analysis, mate.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Pascal.
I think that was perfect, mate. No need to further it up.
Pascal also is Australian.
Well, the Australians, to move it back to the international level, right? What we're seeing is a discontinuity, a disjuncture, a grand divergence between the United States and the rest of the Western advanced economies. Like in Canada, the Conservatives had been favored to replace an unpopular Labour government, center-left government in Australia, and the Trump effect got Labour a third term. And it will be interesting to see to what extent this phenomenon translates into downstream effects, changes in the underlying model, which will still be a capitalist one, which will still be a market-based one. But there are better and worse flavors of even neoliberalism.
Absolutely.
And the particularly toxic version that Trump is brewing is become unpalatable abroad. Like only Orban would be interested.
But I have a question about that, though. I mean, because I definitely see this, definitely in the English-speaking world, and maybe we're off topic now. But what do we explain what's going on in Germany? Because, I mean, the CDU, we can explain that happening before Trump. That's the Christian Democrats coming to power. And the Greens and the SPD really botched their last, their one term in power. But apparently, the one country where the far right is still rising pretty quickly amongst young people that doesn't be affected by the Trump situation is Germany, because the alternative for Dutchland is still growing. And I also wonder what happens if you get what I like to call now the Keir Starmer effect, which is basically the James Carville strategy, which can work to get you back in office, but won't work to keep you, or at least to keep people below you there, because you don't do anything when you get that power. Now, I don't know that that's going to be true for Mark Carney. That's a very different situation. And since the Canadian national identity is not the U.S., and that's always been the primary national identity, the dynamics are there. And that does seem to be spreading through the English-speaking world. But I do wonder what that's going to mean. I mean, the other thing is Trump is dropping in popularity fast enough that he's now like talking about criminalizing pollsters. So it's not like it's going well for his brand here either. But again, what do we have in response to it? You have the AOC anti-oligarchy thing, which is basically let's do 2015 again. And then you have what exactly? Like Cory Booker?
I mean, again, I think there's a massive downplaying on the fact that there's a lot of people from a lot of different stripes coming to these anti-oligarchy things. And if people don't want to take advantage of this mass meeting of people that have like-minded ideologies, then everyone's just waiting for the right people to do the right thing. And that's silly. You don't have to.
Well, yeah, I think it's worth saying like that there was like a chat comment earlier that said something about the rallies scooping up the remains, and from what I could tell, I really don't think that's accurate. Like I don't think these are remains of anything. I think a lot of these are new people. Like I know a lot of people showing up to these rallies who did not go to any Palestine protests and who did not vote for Bernie Sanders in 2020.
Let me give you an anecdotal example. Like one of my friends, Jim Davis, who's here in Springfield, he's kind of like the OG Springfield leftist. He goes back to the 70s. So he's followed. He's from Chicago, but he's been here for a long time. Followed all these left movements. From Occupy to the Bernie movement, all this stuff. And one thing that he told me, because he was managing all these Facebook groups, is what we're seeing now is like just a lot of normies, a lot of normie Democrats, or at least a proportion of normie Democrats, especially, the kind of indivisible type people, people who were pro-Biden, people who were pro-Hillary Clinton. A lot of those people seem to have become radicalized because of the loss of Kamala Harris. And then a lot of the kind of the kind of discourse that used to work in the past to kind of keep them on the kind of straight and narrow of the Democratic Party establishment doesn't work anymore. And I think this is borne out by polling. Polls from 2017 show that, Democratic Party voters were by and large quite happy with the political leadership of the Democratic Party. People like Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, the kind of Russia stuff, that played very well with the Democratic Party base. But I think a lot of them felt deeply betrayed by the Democratic Party, and especially the loss of the Democratic Party, and then the subsequent weakness of the Democratic Party. And I don't know how if this will be memory hold, but between November and the inauguration in January, the Democratic Party was was like completely demoralized, defeated, was retreating from political engagement. People were unsubscribing from these podcasts that had lied to them about the. But because of the actions of the Trump administration, this is probably a miscalculation on the part of the Trump administration. Had they behaved in a slightly more moderate fashion, they probably could have secured their position a lot more firmly, because elected Democrats were willing to roll over. But now you look and you see even relatively normie Democrats are being. I mean, you could watch the Bulwark. Which I know Varn watches as well, which is the Never Trump show. And even there, you've got Bill Kristol wanting to popular front with AOC and criticizing the Democratic Party establishment for being insufficiently anti-Trump. I think like Chuck Schumer is toast. I think
I think a lot of old-fashioned resistance liberalism kind of burned itself out. I think a lot of the people who are the sort of most adamant about it, like, really just got burned out, and like they just don't have the energy anymore. I think that the sort of failure of the strategy was very obvious, right? But there's a lot of but like the irony, of course, is that's happening at the same time that Trump 2.0 is actually much more of like a fulfillment of the worst fears of old school resistance.
But this is what I think
Trump 1 was, right? I mean, this is what Kuba and I said in our article in Jacobin last September, right? Don't count out that Megan dystopia just yet, right? Sadly, the most accurate thing ever said in there, right? So, which means that there's a tremendous amount of appetite for some sort of resistance and pushback among
I think the resistance,
and I just want to say, like, I think that this is, because there's that appetite, a lot of it is actually being channeled in this 2015ish direction, which I have to say, like, I just can't help think is just an absolute positive. I mean, this is, like, you're going to have, I saw somebody making a joke in the chat about, I mean, they weren't saying this. I think they were like describing the views of others, right? But something about like people being like annoyed because of all the wine moms and we're getting into this stuff. It's like, look, you're not going to have much of a mass movement if it doesn't include any women who have children and like wine, right? Like that's I think the hope for the future. Like, most people at best right now are normie libs, right? Like if you can like convince anything that's better than that is pretty fucking marginal, right? So like if you can convince a lot of those people to relate their fears about Trumpist authoritarianism to some sort of critique of economic inequality, which is the whole point of the fighting oligarchy framing. That seems like a very long step in the right direction to me.
Well, I just want to add on to that. I mean, I think the point comes down to is that a lot of normie libs in the Democratic Party base took the resistance liberal narrative seriously, right? Exactly. Like they believed the liberal, but now with the Trump 2.0, the kind of incongruity between the actions of the Democratic Party leadership and the discourse about fascism that they've been espousing have become too big to gap. There's like no excuse anymore. There's just a complete, like, if you look at the polling of the Democratic Party, you can see that even as the Democratic Party wins a huge victory in Wisconsin with the judges election, the party still has an extremely low rating. I suspect the big story of this electoral cycle that's coming up, is going to be the interesting part is going to be the struggle within the primaries between, and I think there's going to be a lot of very capable people who are going to be people who have been dismissed from civil service jobs, people who are in the legal professions, who are going to seek to challenge incumbent Democratic Party centrists and see where this goes. I mean, I don't know where this goes, but I think it's a kind of interesting development. Just at the moment where, quote unquote, the millennial left is dead, it comes back. Except not with the millennials, but with Gen Xers and people who have been radicalized, who have finally.
The phrase "the millennial left" never made sense. Like they have the actual generational math is just wrong, right? For that, right? Like every narrative I've ever heard about the so-called millennial left, it's like people will start with like the Battle of Seattle, which was like all Xers. Like it's.
I mean, the term. I think the term has utility. At least if we want to talk about a specific moment between around 2015 and 2020, where you have,
and then the narrative is always about like whatever random meeting Chris Catrone happened to go to in 2006. That becomes like the important landmark in the history of the land.
I mean, the landmark is there's a moment from 2015 to 2020 where you have both in Britain and the United States, as well as in other parts of the world, this kind of revival of like what we would call in Britain old labor, like comes back from the thing. And, a lot of people who had been apolitical, I know this from my personal experience, who had been apolitical for years and years, finally enter into the political process. I mean, it's really remarkable, for example, that Corbyn, even losing an election in 2017, received more votes than Keir Starmer did, winning a huge majority. So there's a kind of, whatever we want to call it, like the Bernie Corbyn moment off the left. Just as that looks like it's been defeated, it seems to be sort of reviving itself again. Because, I was expecting us to all retreat back into kind of normie liberalism. But, Trump, with his actions, has kind of made that it's made it impossible for the Democratic Party establishment to capitulate to Trump in the way that they perhaps had initially thought they wanted to do in late 2024 and early 2025. He's just made it impossible for them, and with the huge economic crisis that we're staring down the barrel of, I think people are deeply, deeply panicked and looking for a solution. And I think a lot of the people who, even as late as 2020, were like never Bernie people, are out there going like, wow, this guy seems to be the only one who, I mean, there's a reason the Democratic Party establishment, someone like Elise Slock in a War on Terror freak show, is saying like, talk about a king as opposed to an oligarchy, because a king can just be a despot, whereas the oligarchy points to the economic sort of structure that is built under that. A king is just a tyrant. An oligarchy is a critique of the thing, and I don't know if the Democratic Party can weather it. They may be able to weather this storm. They may stick Pete Buttigieg up there, and we'll end up with a kind of Keir Starmer 2.0. But who knows where anything's going?
I think we have really lost the plot on what we were talking about, because in some sense we do have to talk about politics, but on the other sense, like, what generations are we talking about here? Millennials, which is a very large generation, actually, like just geographically speaking, they're no larger than the boomers because so many boomers have died post-COVID. Gen Xers, which you've seen a lot of radicalized Gen Xers, but I will also say that's the age group that is the biggest voting age group for the GOP
Trump.
Still.
Gen X
what about these fucking kids? Yeah, what about these kids? Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like what's going to happen to the Democrats or the GOP as if we have any idea what's going to emerge out of this. We know that this is not very popular, and but neither is the Democratic Party, and yet when we talk about something like the AOC, I'm sure Ben might actually disagree with me on this, but the AOC Bernie rallies, the problem, well, maybe he won't disagree with me on this, actually. The problem is it's focused on those two figures. Whether or not we're complaining about it or empowering them, that's what it's focused on. that does not build para institutions to support those figures, even if they did come to power, which is highly unlikely in the immediate run. That doesn't build leverage within the party, which is still actually very important. Or leverage outside of the party, which would be very important if you wanted leftists not to be captured by flocking from one party to another all the time. I mean, the natural tendency of most left wingers is to find what other party they want to fucking tail at any given moment, and when they correct tailism, they just go tail something else.
I think that
what are kids going to do with that? I don't know. That's nothing.
The one thing that we need to make clear is that any notion, generationally or not, that the Democratic Party is going to change its donor structure to become more radicalized because of Trump is an absolute fantasy.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of I think if you're going to have like a real conversation about this, what you'd have to clarify is what you mean by the Democratic Party, right? Because going back to the conversation with Kuba earlier about youth wings, we don't have, and we've really never had, but especially now we don't have political parties in the sense that they have them in Europe and Latin America and other places in the United States. It's like mass membership organizations. Like we don't have parties in that sense. We have ballot lines, and we have like machines, right? Like so there's Pascal, when you're talking about the donor structure, right? You're talking about like kind of the like centrist Dem machine, right? Which is which is certainly associated with the ballot line, right? But those are different things, right? Like, and it's certainly the case. I don't know anybody. I mean, I probably would if I traveled in different circles, but it's like everybody I know is like a weird, angry leftist, right? So they have I don't know anybody who thinks that it's this sort of like democratic, like political machine is going to like suddenly change its class stripes, right? I mean, the sort of view that was that was ascendant, and I think I mean, I was kind of rolling my eyes at various things I've heard from various people that use the phrase millennial left earlier, but I do think any sensible use of that phrase would start no earlier than 2015, because that's when you have just the barest beginnings of that, right? But it's like the sort of heyday of that, the sort of view that was ascendant was the like Seth Ackerman Party of a New Type thing, which was which wasn't about the sort of democratic machine, but it was about like, okay, you like build your alternate machine, but given the sort of ways that the deck is stacked against third parties in the U.S., even worse than it's stacked against insurgent primary challengers, you contest for the ballot line, and of course it's that's been any victories won using that strategy have been few and far between. The obstacles have been enormous, etc. But I think that if I don't think that there's a sort of, I think the kind of basic electoral dilemma of the left in the U.S. is like, I don't think anybody has like a great solution to it. I think you at a certain point, like, you can't just sort of like will history forward by yelling enough at podcasts, but I do think the other half of that dilemma is that it's like, okay, if we're going to compare two strategies, right, you need to talk about the successes of both of them, right? So so in one case, okay, you only elect a few people to Congress, you only win a few states in the 2020 primary or whatever, and by and large, the empire strikes back and you're defeated and crushed. In the other case, there just aren't any successes. There's like a century of continuous effort with literally nothing to show for it, right? So like, I don't, I think it's perfectly legitimate to look at that and just kind of be a nihilist because like nothing's working. But like, I think if you're going to sort of critique a specific strategy in the name of another specific strategy, you need to look at the track record of both.
You don't want to go bowling with Doug Lane then and rebuild socialism that way?
I would totally go bowling with Doug Lane. I like Doug. I think
I like Doug too. I wonder. I'm just saying, like, Let's do
I-
bowling strategy.
Yeah, look, I would totally go bowling with Doug. He could.
None
bring
of
some
you guys ever
friends.
go bowling with me, so you're lying about bowling.
I have literally bowled with you, Jason.
Oh, you have bowled with me. Okay, I take it back. That's wrong.
There you go, Jason. Why do you have those glasses look like they belong to a 55-year-old black woman who's looking after her daughter's kids?
Maybe that's one of my alternate personalities. Maybe you should stop worrying about me.
Holy shit! I want to see the Jason Medea universe.
Yes, the Jason Medea universe. That's what we need.
I really don't want to see that.
You don't want to see the Jason Medea universe? That's going to be the best.
I think you're just jealous because you don't have girl boss glasses, as they call
I
them.
know I don't have those glasses. I'm stuck with this last pair of glasses because my kids have destroyed every pair of glasses.
Yeah, it's always the kids. It's always
No, it's not
fucking
always
kids.
the kids because my sunglasses
Mhm.
Sarah broke those, and then she was like, "Oh, your glasses broke." I was like, "They broke like by themselves? They broke?" And she was like, "Well, the screw fell out." I was like, "Well, what was the context in which the screw fell out?" She's trying to avoid responsibility, typical leftist, right? Avoiding responsibility for her own actions, which were breaking my cool sunglasses glasses.
Well, these are my cool
Grandma glasses.
I don't know who the fuck grandma you've been hanging around, but it definitely wasn't mine. Some whatever hip fucking grandma you've been hanging around. Gene doesn't know black people. He just knows black images on TV. So
Exactly.
he thinks all black women are like Patti LaBelle.
I mean, I think that the first entry on the live chat today may be me quipping that those glasses were stolen from a sexy librarian.
All right. Well, if we're gonna end
Jason
the way
also stole her heart.
if we're gonna end the way we started, right? We want to bring it back to the clouds and the kids. It's then it's like, yeah, come on, you gotta log off. Start put away the smartphone, meet some sexy librarians, steal their glasses.
Oh, dude, I totally thought I was gonna meet a fucking sexy something yesterday at that thing, and it was just a nightmare of a trip
It's
back
a nightmare.
home.
What happened? Or no, is this an off-air conversation?
I'll be somewhat
Jason,
honest.
for Jason Miles, there's no such thing as an off-air.
Oh, there's fucking fuck off. There's all totally off-air conversations. These people don't hear a third of the shit.
No, your off-air conversations are the conversations that most content creators would actually put on air.
This actually happened. So there's a monthly thing that they have here.
Period?
I'm sorry.
A period?
Wow. No. A monthly get together. They didn't even have a name for it. They call it the monthly thing. It's at a different person's house every month. And I told Ben about it because Ben hasn't been here for the last few months. I was like, "Oh, Ben, there's the monthly thing," but Ben was going somewhere else. But I thought he was going to come to the monthly thing, and my neighbors were telling me, "Oh, Jason, at the last monthly thing, there's a young lady in town that lives here. Did you know that?" I was like, "I've never seen a young person here. There's a lot of older people where we live." And they said, "Yeah, and we believe she's a young black lady." And so my neighbor shows me a picture, and this is an attractive young woman. He goes, "We've been telling her about you, so come to the thing this next month." So I told Ben, and in my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh, Ben's not going to come to the thing, but maybe he's going to come to the thing." But you have to preemptively know how to try to cock block people if you're trying to talk to the one person under 60 at the thing. So in my mind, I'm thinking in my head, okay, if Ben comes, I know how I'm going to cock block him. I'm just going to yell out, "Ben was on Rogan," and then all the people will talk to Ben, and then I can scoot over and talk to the young lady. If Ben brings our other friend, I could be like, "David's an actor." They can all talk to David. and I can scoot over. So I'm already thinking about my plan as Ben and I are walking back to my car, and Ben goes, you know what? I'm not going to go to the thing. I'm going to go to eat sushi. And I was like, awesome. And as soon as I got in my car, Ben, I'm all excited. And I totally forgot that earlier in the morning I had eaten chorizo that I bought from 7-Eleven.
Continue.
And oh shit, Varn was off the screen. I'm so sorry. And I didn't know. Maybe you shouldn't buy chorizo from 7-Eleven. And my insides told me, uh-oh, can you make it home in time? Because the 7-Eleven chorizo is unhappy with your insides.
This is nice, you know, because I don't want anybody who feels judged, any young people watching this conversation. It's like, look, man,
no young people
we're all
watching.
trying to figure it out. Like everybody's, you know, it's you could be in your late 40s and just now be learning not to eat the 7-Eleven chorizo.
So Ben can tell you from where we parked our car at what's soon to be Give Them a Revolution Studios to where we live can be a 15 to 35-minute drive. I have never weaved out of traffic like that before, Ben. And the whole entire time, I'm clenched. I'm clenched in a way I've never been clenched before because I don't think I can make it. And I'm having a weird compromise with myself in the car where the 7-Eleven chorizo is like, look, man, this is just going to happen. And maybe you should just let this happen. And I'm like, no, I can't.
Did you let it happen?
I can't shit on myself in the car. And I almost had it, Ben. I almost had it. And there's a checkpoint now where we live because we live by a military base. So now there's a big time checkpoint where we stay. And they didn't stop me, but I had to slow down. And that slow down was too much.
Oh no.
And so we also live on a dirt road and you have to take it slow because it's bumpy. Cuba knows. So I'm motor up the dirt road, Ben. I smash into the driveway and I start running into my house. And I'm like, I made it. I made it in my house. I made it in the bathroom. I'm safe. And I exhaled. And then I looked because, you know, the door's open in the bathroom. I looked. And then I just heard the music from MASH playing because I didn't make it.
Ew, wait, TMI, man.
You didn't make it?
I did.
I'm so sad about that. You pooped yourself. We've all been there.
Every step of this conversation. I mean, like, look. It wasn't even one of those weird Mexican. It's even one of those weird Mexican toilets you have to pay to get into. It seems like that will be the problem.
TMI.
Which, by the way, just if you're ever a tourist in Mexico, just so you know, the pay toilets are actually somehow worse than the free ones, and I don't know why.
Yes, they are.
But they are.
They are so much worse. That's what I was scared of. Varn, you know how it is here. Either it's a pay toilet that's super frightening, or there's just nothing. And I was like, dude, I can make it. I can make. Oh, dude, it was bad. There's mopping involved.
So what are we saying that the Zoomers need diapers? Is that what we're on?
We're saying that
I wasn't going to go that far. but
There's things you can purchase at 7-Eleven, and there's things you shouldn't purchase at 7-Eleven.
surprisingly, in Japan, the 7-Eleven sushi is really good. But it's the only gas station sushi I would touch.
No,
but that's because it's in Japan.
No. I had the Japanese 7-Eleven sushi, and I had the worst food poisoning of my life. I saw
Cuba
demons.
didn't make it.
Genghis
Cuba
Khan.
didn't make it.
So Kuba's like, Derek, apparently I can just eat sewage, but like
You have a raccoon's stomach.
Cuba didn't make it. So now you know, Ben, if you're tempted to go, I'll save a few pesos and get the
Or yen.
7-Eleven chorizo. Or yen, yeah. Don't do it.
Oh, Dios míos, you know?
7-Eleven chorizo. What is that even made out of?
Dios míos.
Consistency was
Possum
so
meat.
odd.
Possum meat.
Possums would be expensive to get. I mean, like, I'm actually imagining, like, I don't know, maybe it's like possum that's like left over from a processing or something, or hair that's just texturized to be like meat. I have no idea. I just 7-Eleven. I'm not usually disparaging Mexico, but I would not have been as brave as Jason to eat 7-Eleven chorizo, and I told you I can eat trash.
You know, it was a dark time. And I was like, this will be fine for breakfast. It's a larger log. That didn't make sense, but
No, it did make sense. All right.
Okay. Someone said avoid the water. I've avoided everything except for apparently 7-Eleven chorizo. So that is
You've avoided the water, but you ate 7-Eleven chorizo, which has water in it.
Has anyone watched this video where this woman called like a 5-year-old autistic boy the N-word, and now she's raised $1 million?
no, it was 300,000 last I saw. That was like
300,000.
yesterday. That's still a lot of money to raise.
That's still a lot of money, man.
Yeah. Apparently the little boy was messing with her diaper bag or something.
Yeah.
And she called him the N-word, and then
Straight to the N-word. Why don't you just say, like,
everybody's look, if you're pissed off and if you make the N-word your trigger button, then people are going to start using it for anything, like the Indian woman. And that's what the white chick did. Do you see the video of her? I said it. Nigger.
that's true.
Yeah. And then people are like, I'm so sorry that all those N-words keep pressuring you and making you feel bad because you're defending your child. It's like, defending your child from what? A terrorist attack? Fucking Magneto's crew? Like, who
Also,
the fuck are you defending your kid against?
Also, if there was really an issue of defending the child, how would say the N-word help? Like
It's never helped me.
It's like a distress call, Your cats have one. White people have one.
Cooper said the N-word is like the bat signal.
The bad signal for white people. Can you imagine? Your fucking Mrs. Cuba is walking down one of those cold Canada streets. She's accosted by nondescript people of color because it's Canada. She just yells out the N-word. Is that summer?
I don't know. I just watched Sinners. I'm led to believe it brings out vampires. So
well, I love Sinners, but the confusing thing about Sinners is that the vampires are actually pretty woke.
yeah, no, I noticed that as well. The vampires are like, we're all one family and share memories. We're a hive mind, and I was like, okay.
Do you guys like Sinners?
They
I
call
like
it
Sinners.
the
I mean, I thought the music was great. I like seeing a big action horror movie that's like very talky like that. Like, I like the dialogue.
It was good.
Yeah, it's a very solid movie.
Also,
I'm not sure I understand like if it has a political perspective or anything, but it was good.
Whatever.
Yeah, who cares? I don't.
It's a movie.
I didn't know there was an.
It's as woke as Jason's chorizo.
The soaked in fucking Mexican tap water. And yeah, I don't even want to talk about it, man. It was bad. It was a dark time. So if we're gonna go out today and have food, we're walking to Telefonica.
Yeah, I mean, or just the pizza place. I mean, right?
All right, guys, I gotta go head out and table something for a union. So I'll see you guys later.
Oh, look at you! I gotta go do some union organizing. Thank you, Derek Varn.
I have to go parent my children now too. So.
Thank you, Gene Bajlan. Where do you go?
I have to go write some geopolitics reports for Swiss investment banks.
Thank you, Kuba. I think Pascal had the
I gotta go.
chorizo. Thank you, Pascal Robert.
Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta go to Tijuana, get some get some good food. Maybe maybe buy like I don't think I have like a Judas Priest T-shirt. Maybe.
Oh, you don't have a Priest T-shirt? Oh, dude, yeah. So we're gonna go to the spot. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ben Burgess. You guys don't understand how excited I was when I got in the car. Ben was like, "I don't want to go over here." I was like, "Oh, fuck yeah!" I'm singing weird 70s songs. Hot blooded, check it and see. Hot black chicks gonna be fucking with me. I was all excited. Didn't happen. Did not happen. Stay away from anything that is not prepackaged in dry goods from 7-Eleven. It's not right. It's just not right. Ben wrote, I genuinely hope she didn't watch it. I don't care. I don't care. It happens. Not a young man anymore, apparently. Real life showed me that. And I still make stupid decisions. Like thinking that I can, outwill 7-Eleven chorizo from Mexico. You can't. You can't do that. But thank you guys. We'll be back Tuesday. We do a really fun show Tuesday. Booked it like at 3:00 this morning. We'll be talking. It'll be a fun movie talk. I'll just leave it at that. It'll be a fun movie talk. I'll leave it at that. With a director of a movie. I'm going to leave it at that. You can guess what movie it is. It is not Sinners, by the way. And wow, those are definitely librarian glasses. You guys are so fucking mean. Jesus. I try to be mildly stylish. Jason, don't eat salmon patties from a vending machine or you will die. I don't have a lot of money. It was affordable. It was kind of staring at me like, oh, hey, you should eat me. I'm fine. And I thought to myself, well, everybody else can eat it. I'm fine. I eat shit. I've never had anything come back with a vengeance like that at that time. Like I had just sat in my car. I was all excited. I really was like singing and shit. And it was just like, dude, this isn't going to work out for you. You got to make a decision right now. Either you're going to try to use the bathroom that Derek Varn described. It's going to sound like a developing world nightmare where they're going to charge you for toilet paper squares. Or you can try your luck motoring home. Or you can take the obvious option, which is let it go, let it go. I chose to risk it. And I almost made it. But oof. I thought I was safe. And then I'd like turned around and this wasn't right. Thank you guys again. And we are out.